Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered in my 47 years of doing therapy. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice on the website at whyagain.org. We encourage people to go to that website and click on the Start Here link in the upper left-hand corner. When you do that, it'll take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that particular chapter of that book contains a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 17 years to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file, absolutely free. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland, Aramaic, Forgiveness, and before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon, which will give you access, if you click on it, give you access to a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope you choose to do that soon and often because it frequently leads to comments, questions, testimonials, or requests for assistance in applying the tools. And that's why we're here in our current format, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. We're also doing the Course in Miracles workbook lessons this year. And today is the 342nd day of the year. And I'm going to back up just a minute, a couple days, and remind us that there's a section with a title with a question, what is a miracle? And the short version of the answer to that is that a miracle is a movement from hostility to or fear to love, the choice of changing the filter in your mind, shifting your perception from fear to love. A miracle is a correction. It doesn't change anything. It's you becoming aware of the truth of what already is. The miracle would be the correction of a false perception. And then yesterday, we read a lesson that's very convoluted, but essentially what it means is you were given total perfect safety as an entity when you were born. Your essence cannot be harmed in any way. And anytime you generate thoughts of attack, that you're being attacked or you're attacking someone else, you're creating the false belief that you are vulnerable, that there's something you could lose that is of value. Absolute sense, that there is something you could gain that is of value in an absolute sense. So today, lesson 342 says, I let forgiveness rest upon all things, for thus forgiveness will be given to me. And when you read that, at first glance, it's tempting to think in terms of pardoning. I'll forgive and I'll pardon everybody else, and then people will pardon me for my sins. But I call us to our last lesson, which said, you are perfect, whole, and complete, and totally sinless, and that is your true nature. So there is nothing for me to be forgiven for. It's just the forgiveness in this work means the removal of any false perception. So I will see everything clearly, and then I will be seen clearly and truthfully as the blessing of the creative energy expressing in form that I am. Second part of the commentary begins with, "Brother, forgive me now." And I would bring our definition of forgiveness into this, and that can more accurately be stated, sister and brother, see us, let us see each other as we truly are. The blessing of the creative energy expressing in form. Every time we have a perception that generates hostility or fear or comes from a mind that is loaded with hostility or fear, it's a lie. It's a hallucination. It's an illusion. And all of these lessons are about restoring our accurate perception. End all the dreams of separation. See the truth that it's a miracle that we're here, that we have the gift of life, and that the source of all life has given us everything that we have, the ability to be aware, all energy, all ability to perceive, etc., and understand that the best use of any negative emotional state is as an alarm system to help me wake up to the fact that there's something about my thought process in this moment that is in error. And when I correct that thought process, when I choose a different filter for my thoughts, then my perception is restored. Perception, true perception, that spiritual faculty. We're also doing the Course in Miracles experiment lessons from Pam Grout, and lesson 342 is titled, "Drink It Up, My Friends." And she quotes St. Augustine. I'll never know why people do that, but she quotes St. Augustine as saying, "Love God and do what you want." Pam writes, "I used to believe if I surrendered to the dude," that's her word for God or the Creator, "if I surrendered to the dude, I'd be required to work with starving babies in countries with Ebola and typhoid and other unmentionable diseases." She says, "I attribute this to the stream of foreign missionaries that came through my home when I was a kid." Lesson 342 tells me, "The only thing the dude asks of me is to expand his goodness and to love as much as I possibly can. By simply showing up and using the gifts I was given, I receive even more gifts. To name just a few, point number one, I was invited to Verona, Italy, where I danced to a 12-piece orchestra at a 16th century estate that once hosted Winston Churchill and Lady Di. And I stood on Juliet's famous balcony. For good measure, I even shouted out, 'Wherefore art thou, Romeo?' Point number two, I was slathered by volcanic ash and sand at the Puning Hot Springs and Spa near Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines. Point number three, I was hosted by a Renaissance castle. I was hosted in a Renaissance castle, complete with a moat, just outside the medieval town of Kutná Hora, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the Czech Republic. Point number four, I walked 40 miles of Cotswold Trail in England. It's where the PBS show Father Brown is filmed. Point number five, and I got to help break the Guinness World Record for most zombies. She puts in parentheses here, I used beet juice for blood, closing parentheses, and she was dancing to Michael Jackson's Thriller. She writes, I love that about the dude. He only wants my good. He only wants to bless me. He only wants me to use my gifts, the ones that creation has given her, to expand creation's glory. And that's what each and every one of us are called to do. And if we don't know how to do that, it's recommended in this work that we take a breath before we do anything and just ask our internal guidance, how can I be a blessing to myself and others in this next moment? What is mine to do here? I wonder how this message, this moment, this series of events is going to turn out better than I could have imagined. And then, if I'm willing to take that move, then I simply rest and trust in the knowledge that whatever happens after that is going to be just fine. It's going to be better than anything I could have predicted or planned with my conscious logical mind. And I open myself up to insight, guidance, synchronicity, miracles, whatever you want to call it, when I step out of the process of mind that says, I'm going to figure this out. Michael Rice calls figuring it out the number one solution for the non-being mind, the part of my mind that thinks that it's smarter than everyone and everything else. It's constantly trying to figure things out. And that's a trap. It's a big trap, especially when it comes to the mental and emotional and psychological discomforts that we experience, because they are created through a misapplication of our conscious logical mind. And so the application of the conscious logical mind cannot be the solution that was created by that same process. So, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. We had our support group last night, and somebody put out the request to have a less intense meeting than previous weeks. And then somebody else suggested, why don't we listen to some Way of Mastery? That's a loving, kinder, gentler, loving version of the Course in Miracles, so why don't we listen to part of that? So we did. We listened to the reading of Lesson 20. And if the comments from the participants are any indication, it did strike people as a more loving, a more gentle, kind, nurturing way to spend the, I guess it was close to an hour and a half. And the comments and processing that went on after that seemed to me anyway to be useful. The title of that lesson is Vigilance for the Kingdom. And as so often happens in a book like that, which is pretty much a fractal to my way of thinking about it, each chapter contains parts of every other chapter. And it's talking about how we create our own experience of life, and whatever we decree, we experience, because our experience is an internal creation of our own perception that's driven by the interpretation we give these life events. And as the Course in Way of Mastery talks about it so many different ways, it says all events are neutral. As a matter of fact, there's an entire lesson in that book titled All Events Are Neutral. And then it's very clear that while all events are neutral, my thoughts about them are not neutral. My thoughts about the life events that unfold, that pass in front of me, that I'm a part of, they are what create my happiness, my sadness, my fear, my anger, my contentment, etc. I mentioned that I've been reading yet another book by Pam Grout, and in that book, one of the themes that is so strongly resonant for me is that she's talking over and over again about being gentle with yourself. And when you find yourself trying to do one of these lessons and you find yourself off the mark, just see it. Just say, oh, I just spent some time gossiping, or I just spent some time blaming, or I just spent some time beating myself up. Okay. Take a breath and then start again. And she's talking about the Lojong teachings and how they're organized around 7 points. Those 7 points contain 59 slogans that remind us about how to awaken our hearts. And I think, I don't know how many she puts in the book, but there are 19 of them here in this article I pulled up. And it asks us to first train in the preliminaries. In the basic preliminaries, number one, maintain an awareness of the preciousness of human life, which is right in line with the reality management worksheet, which right at the very beginning it says, look, in the beginning, the premise that we begin this worksheet, and every worksheet is, the premise is my essential nature, my human life, my very being is love. And the goal of this worksheet is to help me remove any form of hostility or fear so that it's easy for me to have direct conscious awareness of my true nature. And in this work, the Buddhist work, my true nature contains the My true nature contains the preciousness of human life. The second point in the preliminaries is be aware of the reality that life ends. Death comes for everyone. And that's one of those preliminaries that helps people move into the process of letting go, which is a part of a skill set. The third point in the preliminaries is recall that whatever you do, whether it's virtuous or not, has a result. There are consequences to everything we do, and it's okay. The fourth point is contemplate that as long as you are too focused on your self-importance or too caught up in thinking about how you are good or how you are bad, as long as you're focused too much on that, you will continue to suffer. If you obsess about getting what you want and avoiding what you don't want, you will continue to suffer. So then there are these slogans. One of them is, regard all dharmas, all realities, all experiences you have as dreams. Whatever you experience in your life, pleasure, pain, cold, heat, or anything else, is like something happening in a dream. If you can move to that state and recognize that your essence is not impacted by this, your essence is simply having an experience of that, it helps minimize your suffering. The next one says, sending and taking should be practiced alternately. These two should ride like the breath. practice of Tonglen, where we pull in the pain and suffering of ourselves and anybody else, and we send out the healing and joy to everyone else. The next slogan is, drive all blames into one. This is advice on how to work with your fellow beings. Everyone is looking for someone to blame, and therefore aggression and neurosis will keep expanding. Instead, pause and look at what's happening with you. When you hold on so tightly to your view of what this other person did or didn't do, then you get hooked. And your own self-righteousness causes you to get all worked up and to suffer. So work on cooling that reactivity rather than escalating it. This approach reduces suffering, yours and everyone else's. It's just the flow of life. There is no one to blame. Instead of talking about blame, let's ask, how can I assist this suffering to unravel itself? The next slogan says, be grateful to everyone. This is the art of learning to understand that everyone and everything you come into contact with has the potential to show you where you are stuck. When they say or do something and you automatically get hooked, whether it's a familiar pattern of getting hooked or an unfamiliar pattern, and you react by shutting down or speeding up and getting all worked up, when you react in the habitual way with any of the negative emotions, anger, greed, bitterness, hurt, resentment, this gives you a chance to see the boulders in your backpack that you walked into that moment with. And if you're willing to unload the backpack and see what's in there, then you can work with them honestly and compassionately. The next slogan is, all Dharma agrees at one point. All of the Buddhist teachings, all of the Dharma teachings are about lessening one's self-absorption and lessening the clinging to the ego identification. And the more you lessen those things, the happier you are. The next slogan says, of the two witnesses, hold the principal one. The two witnesses of what you do are others and yourself. Of these two, you are the only one who really knows exactly what is going on with you. So work with seeing yourself with compassion and absolute honesty. The next slogan says, always maintain a joyful mind. Constantly apply cheerfulness, if for no other reason than because you are on the spiritual path. Have a sense of gratitude to everything and everyone, even difficult emotions, because they have the potential to wake you up. Words from Anthony DeMello echoing in my head. Wake up. Be aware. Awareness, awareness, awareness. Wake up. You're asleep. If you're angry, you're asleep. If you're sad, you're asleep. If you're holding offense, bitterness, resentment, hurt, guilt, shame, blame, you're asleep. Wake up. Awareness, awareness, awareness. The next slogan says, abandon any hope of fruition. Be awake and aware and allowing and supportive and accepting of what's going on in the moment. Don't think this isn't good enough, I need this or that to change for me to be happy. The key instruction here is to stay in the present moment. Guy Finley calls it the presence moment. Don't get caught up in hopes that you'll achieve something in the future. or being proud of your situation or your strengths or your values or how things might get better someday. Be in the present moment. Makes me think of I had a person in my office not too long ago, and I said, so when you look at your current situation, what is it that you don't like? And or how do you see it? And she said, well, I don't have this, and I don't have this, and I don't have this. She listed like 5 or 6 things that she doesn't have because her parents are dead, so she doesn't have any parents living. She's not married, so she doesn't have a partner. And I just sat there with this smile on my face because she gave me the perfect way to address her situation. She didn't talk about a single thing that she does have, and she's got quite a bit. She's got a good job. She's got a roof over her head. She's got pets. She's got her, relative physical health and all kinds of physical possessions. She's got some very good friends, and she didn't list any of the things that she has. She just listed a bunch of things she doesn't have. And that was setting her up to think she needs to get some of those things in order to be happy, in order to heal, in order to move forward, in order to move out of depression, etc. You will never be complete. One of the ways that the Way of Mastery talks about this is to say, how could you ever hope to finish knowing yourself when you are a spark of the ever-expanding consciousness of life? When you are a spark of the divine mind, when you are a spark of creation, how could you ever hope to be done knowing about yourself? Because you're always growing and changing. So this is one that really hits people, this slogan, abandon any hope of ever being done. I remember years ago in the support group, probably 16, 17 years ago, I made a statement like this in a support group sitting around one of those conference room tables. And I said, I'm never going to be done with my work. And a person slammed his fist on the table and raised his voice and said, that's not true. We can be done in a heartbeat, in a flash of an eye, and we can reach enlightenment. And I just smiled and said, okay. He goes, what do you mean, okay? You said you're never going to be done. I said, yeah, I'm never going to be done. You can be done in the next moment if you want. Good luck. I hope you enjoy what you achieve when you think you're done in the next moment, but I don't plan to be done. I had been reading The Way of Mastery and some other teachings that resonated very deeply for me that said it's kind of hopeful that there's always going to be more to learn and grow into about myself, about the nature of life, about creation itself. So this slogan from the Buddhist teachings that says, abandon any hope of fruition, aligns me with this other observation that I don't know everything, and I probably won't ever know everything. And so whatever it is I think I know is either only partially true or perhaps even completely false. So there are others, but let us take a pause here and ask if anybody has any comments, questions, answers, testimonials, requests for support in using the worksheets. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. We've got 6 or 7 people on the call, depends upon who I look at or when I look at the switchboard, and we've got nobody in the chat room, and we've got about 28 minutes to have a conversation. What's on your mind today? What's resonating with your listening to our Course in Miracles lesson for today. One of the things that I got from the Pema Chodron book that was, again, kind of in this context of being gentle with yourself, she's talking about karma and how so many people have this contentious, rough, what goes around comes around, you're going to pay for what you did wrong, kind of, your sins are going to come back and haunt you kind of thought about karma. And here's Pema Chodron writing, and she says, look, let's give up all of that punishment stuff. Let's give up all of that you're going to pay kind of a thought about karma. Let's look at karma as this. The idea of karma is that you continually get to teach the things that you need to teach in order to open your heart. What if the point of life, this extension of creative energy, this unfolding of all the people you're going to meet in your life and how the day goes when it goes against the plan that you had for it, what if all of that is there to serve for the unfolding of opportunities for you to open your heart? And what if being completely open in your heart, being completely in allowance and surrender and willingness to be taught by life in the moment, what if that's the only way for you to achieve the actual contentment or to fulfill your purpose, whatever that might be in the mind of creation, in the flow of life? What if the only way to accomplish that is to be open in your heart space? Guy Finley talks about how lessons are going to keep coming, almost like a broken record. They're going to keep coming back into our life in various forms until we realize that we haven't learned the lesson. And once we realize that we haven't learned the lesson, there's no need for the lesson to keep coming back. Now, notice how it's stated in this negative. It's one of the few things I like to state in the negative because it's the intention of Guy Finley's teaching. So I'm taking the conscious logical mind out of it. So I'm not saying with my conscious logical mind, oh, the lesson I'm supposed to get here is this, this, and this. And I'm using my conscious logical mind to define a particular lesson. How many times have I done that, and then the same kind of problem keeps happening? And I say, oh, so the lesson I'm supposed to get from this is, and I decide on a lesson. But if the problem or the pattern of problem keeps happening, it might be useful for me to wake up and realize, you know what, if this thing keeps happening and it's something I don't like, there must be a lesson in here that I haven't learned. And I open my heart, I open my energy, I open my mind to something that's completely different than anything I've thought about before. And when I do that, there's a potential for learning. Whenever I say, oh, I know what this lesson is for, I'm not learning anything. I'm taking something from my past and trying to stuff the present moment into that format, into that template. So Pema Chodron says, the idea of karma is that you continually get to teach things that you need in order to open your heart. I heard briefly from Corinne Zupko, who is the author of From Anxiety to Love. And we've interviewed her in the past, and I sent her the link to the onbeing.org podcast of The Future of Well-Being with Krista interviewing Surgeon General Vivek Murthy and one of his friends. And she sounds like she's doing well, and that's a book you might want to check out if you've got a lot of anxiety, if you like the Course in Miracles. Corinne is a woman who, as a child, had all kinds of problems with anxiety and actually got labels from psychological and psychiatric professionals. And then finally, when she was in college, she had this crisis, called her mom at 3 in the morning, and her mom said, "Now will you be willing to take a look at the Course in Miracles?" And Corinne was just at such a desperate space that she said, "Okay, I'll even be willing to look at Course in Miracles." And once she got into it, it transformed her life, and she began reading it, studying it, working with it, and she created a book, From Anxiety to Love, that has actual tools in it, suggested meditations and affirmations, and there's a whole systemic way that she uses the teachings. And we reviewed the book, we interviewed her, it's in the archives, and I think that book is on the list of books that we've discussed. You can find on mindshiftersacademy.org website. There's a separate page for books that we've discussed in detail and or interviewed the authors of here on Mindshifters Radio. And I suppose I need to update that to include books like Reconciliation from Thich Nhat Hanh. We've talked about that, how it's about inner child work from one of the great Vietnamese Buddhist teachers. I probably don't have Richard Moss's books up there, Inside Out Healing and the Mandala of Being. I discover the power of awareness. So I will make some time in the near future. I probably don't have Gabor Mate's book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, up there, but that's another one we've talked about quite a bit as having some very useful awareness and citing research about how trauma in our childhood literally changes the structure of our brain as it's developing. So, 563-999-3581. Call that number, press 1, let us know what's on your mind. We've got about 18 minutes left. We've discussed books like Healing Depression Without Medication by Dr. Jody Skillicorn. And here's the book Anxiety to Love by Corinne Zupko, a radical new approach for letting go of fear and finding lasting peace. The hits go on. So I will make the commitment in the next week or so to update that list of books on mindshiftersacademy.org website and add some of the books we've discussed that haven't been listed there. And I will invite you to give us a call or send us an email, tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Or Jeannie, Jeanie, at whyagain.org. And let us know what are your thoughts about who we should interview or books we should read or podcasts we should be listening to. Another book that we've talked about is The Tao Made Easy. And the Tao kind of needs someone like Alan Cohen, who's the author of The Tao Made Easy, for my mind, to help make it more accessible. The Tao, Lesson 60, says, governing a great state is like cooking small fish. And I don't know what that means. Let the kingdom be governed according to the Tao, and the manes of the departed will not manifest their spiritual energy. It's not it's not that those manes have not that spiritual energy, but it will not be employed to hurt men. It is not that it could not hurt men, but neither does the ruling sage hurt them. When these two do not injuriously affect each other, their good fortunes converge in the virtue of the Tao. I kept trying to read this book, The Tao, and I would be as muddled weeks after reading that as I would the first time. And so that's why I picked up a book like The Tao Made Easy by Alan Cohen, and I was very pleased with it. It's now on my minimum of once a year read and reread. The last few years I've done it a couple times a year. And I was blessed with somebody convincing me to try Audible, and those books by Alan Cohen, the ones that I have, Alan Cohen's actually reading them. So you get the author's, not always a good thing, but you get the author's personality and reading style in it. So, what's on your mind? How can we support you? What's a good book we should be reading or an author we should be interviewing? What's an area of interest in your life that we don't talk about as much here because there's, almost 11 years now of conversations around these tools, around our lives as people, around our emotions and relationships, around our physical, mental, and emotional health and well-being. All of that is fair game. How can we support you today? Give us a call and let us know what would be of interest for you to spend the next 14 or 15 minutes discussing. 563-999-3581. Call that number, press 1, and let us know what's on your mind. I was looking up an idiom like the worm has turned. And that's a phrase that my father would use on a regular basis. He was a fan of words. I think I've mentioned he had a very good friend, and they used to greet each other each workday with the word of the day. And they would invite the other to give them a definition of the word and use it in a sentence. And they would keep trying to stump each other back and forth. And the reason I mention this today is because this morning the worm has turned kept popping into my mind. So I looked it up. The idiom, the worm has turned, dates back to the 1500s. An idiom is a word, group of words, or phrase that has a figurative meaning that is not easily deduced from its literal definition. It often uses descriptive imagery, and it's figurative, not literal. Common idioms are words and phrases used in the English language in order to convey a concise idea and are often spoken or are considered informal or conversational. Some of the English idioms can illustrate emotion more quickly than a phrase that has a literal meaning. Even when the origin of the idiomatic expression is lost. People don't even know how or why do they say the worm has turned. Where did that come from? An idiom is a metaphorical figure of speech, and it is understood that it is not a use of literal language. So many English as a second language students do not understand idiomatic expressions such as once in a blue moon, or don't spill the beans, or don't let the cat out of the bag, or chin up, or, that person wasn't on the ball, tree, or I hope he doesn't kick the bucket, or boy, that really hit the nail on the head, or that person's under the weather, or that job was a piece of cake. So why do I mention this? Well, because the work that Michael Rice produces here in our Kabour's manuscript and the reality management worksheet and so many of these tools is based on knowledge of what was going on in the ancient Aramaic language that is not accessible unless one studies and understands the idioms of that time. So, Susan, what's on your mind today?
That's a perfect segue into a fun little thing that happened yesterday. Has Urate sent you a 6-minute long video of Bob Newhart? It's a Bob Newhart pretending he's a therapist. And if she hasn't sent it to you, I can send it to you.
Well, she didn't send it, but I've known of this for a long time. It's the cut it out or the stop it thing, right? And just stop it, just cut it out. It's his 5-minute therapy, right? You pay for 5 minutes, and at the end of the 5 minutes, if you want to keep going and you want to hear him say cut it out even more, you got to pay him more money.
I know. It's fantastic. And yesterday I was just in this funk, and I was on the radio show, and she texted me and said a few kind things and then sent me film. And I watched it, and it was like the instant cure. And I thought, Dr. Tim, if you really did this, if people really did this, you'd be out of a job. It was so perfect. So the fact that you already know it, then I don't need to tell it. I was going to sort of recount what it is on there, but just to say that sometimes the community listeners piping up in a text, even while somebody might be right on the radio show at the time, sometimes it's just so perfect. And this was just so perfect. It cheered me up so much that I've been cheered up ever since. And I couldn't sleep much last night, not because of that, but just even in spite of not being able to sleep, I've just been laughing all day, because it's whenever I start going into my thing, my favorite miserable and stuff, I just remember him yelling, "Stop it!" And it's just very helpful. For short-term therapy, I recommend it.
Okay.
And he shuts people down when they're going into their story, too, and there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, well, and there, if you've, can you hear me?
Yep.
If you've been to a Michael Rice intensive center or one of his intensives long enough, and maybe he doesn't do it as much now, but he especially in the early years of this internet show. He would talk about how he doesn't want to hear your story. He doesn't want to understand how you've created all this pain. He doesn't want to go into your pain with you, because if he goes into your pain with you, he can't help you. He wants to stand outside of it in the knowledge that it's self-induced nonsense and help you see the perspective from which you begin to understand it's not being done to you, and you have a sense of control or agency, personal power that you could use to change the process that's creating what you don't want to feel. So, he would talk more in the past about, I don't want to go into your pain with you, because once I go into your pain with you, once I get angry with you at so-and-so and such, then I can't help you dismantle your pain.
That's really interesting. I understand that. What I always thought he meant by don't go into your story again is because maybe the story was good for background, but to keep going into it means you keep sitting in the victim box. You keep creating the scene, and really, you've got to just stop it. You've got to leave that. Or
that's another. That's another aspect of why it's good to let go of the story.
Right. Or to let it float up and then just let it float right through. And, say, oh, there you are again. Okay, here's the back door. Farewell. Nice that you visited. Thank you very much. Yeah. Not give it any energy. Not go there over and over again. That's one reason I've had a hard time working with Mira. I found her, she's excellent. This isn't bad-mouthing her at all. It's just that she requires a kind of a relaxed meditative inquiry. It's sort of like the patter thing taken so far that, and she'll lead you there. That's her specialty. She calls it the core connection, but it's really the patter section of the worksheet, drawn out. And Tim Bingham and I have been working with her we've agreed to do 3 months of sessions. That's how she sets it up. And when my day comes, I think, oh my God, I got to go in there again. I got to do this. And often I'll go into my session not needing right then, not feeling any upset, feeling good, not wanting to go there. But somehow she gets you there anyway. And I have this question in my mind, is this a good thing? Because I seem to be fine, so why stir the pot again? And I'm reminded of my mother-in-law. Right, or my mother-in-law who used to say, well, I get along all right in life, so why? I've never been in therapy, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. I don't want to bother about that. The machine is working, so I'm going to just lead my life. And, of course, like everybody else, she got mad and she got sad and she had clashes in her relationships. But for her, she felt as if her life was working well enough, and she didn't want to do that. And I had to say, there's something to be said for that, So anyway, I don't know what I'm doing telling you all this stuff, but it was just so fun to have the community draw together in the form of one Urate who's in quarantine and have her send me this absolute perfect thing. Yeah, what?
But before you move off of it,
yeah.
One time when I was in the intensive center at Heartland, it was a teacher training, and we were given a section of the book that we had to teach. And as part of my teaching in prayer and meditation, or whatever you want to call it, trying to prep for this for days, what came to me is the chocolate milk analogy.
Okay.
And the chocolate milk analogy is that when I was a kid, we used to talk about how you could get ice-cold milk. Of course, it wasn't ice-cold, but it was quite cold from the refrigerator. And there was nothing better than this great, fresh, whole, cold milk. You can't get that these days, right? It's all pasteurized and homogenized, and it's not whole and all that. But we used to get it, cream on the top, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So we also had this other very unhealthy thing, which was this chocolate syrup. And, it used to come in a can. And it would be kept in the refrigerator, and the milk would be kept in the refrigerator, and you could pour that syrup into a full glass of milk, and it would all go right to the bottom and settle. And you'd have a glass of white milk with some chocolate syrup sitting at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And so it came to me to talk in this segment where I was supposed to be teaching about this, that if I really love my pure white milk and I go to drink it and I'm drinking it, it's great, and I don't even notice that there's this, 1.5 inches or 2 inches of chocolate syrup at the bottom, because all I'm tasting is the beautiful white milk. And then a spoon gets dropped in and starts spinning around. Mm-hmm. And now the pure white milk that I like is all this brown color, and I taste it and it's horrible. I don't like chocolate, right? And I get angry at the spoon because the spoon gave me chocolate milk.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm absolutely convinced that that's what happened, because I saw that there was white milk, and then the spoon came, and then there's chocolate milk, and that's not right. And I can prove to myself it's the spoon because I pull the spoon out, and I toss it away, and I put my glass of milk in the refrigerator overnight, and I come back the next day, and look, it's white milk again. And I sip it, and it's not quite as good as it was, but it's more like the pure white milk because all the chocolate has settled out. And I can find ways to prove to myself, in quotes, prove, that it was the spoon that gave me that chocolate milk that I don't like.
Okay.
But the fact of the matter is the chocolate was in there before the spoon came along. And the spoon had nothing to do with getting the chocolate in there. And the chocolate is my responsibility if it's my glass of milk. And so all Mira Rubin is doing is pointing out to you that you got a bunch of gunk at the bottom of your glass. And if you don't see her for a while and you hang around people that you like, and you can pretend that there's no gunky black stuff at the bottom of your glass, but that doesn't mean the glass doesn't have gunky black stuff in it.
Point well taken. That's true.
So anyway, thank you so much for piping up here near the end of the show, and it's great to hear from you as always, but we've reached the end of our hour, so I will thank you again and mute your microphone and remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Welcome, Jeannie Rice.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. Excellent example of the chocolate in the glass. I love it.
You've probably forgotten that from the teacher training.
I
but you were there when
until you started
when
telling
that came
it.
Out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Well, have a lovely show. Blessings.
All right. Bye.